There we go. I think I'm on now. All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you happen to be. My name is Christopher Harrison, and this is going to be getting started with TypeScript inside of Vue.js or creating a Vue.js project using TypeScript. Now, I really did appreciate the conversation that was taking place just as I was being introduced there. And, you know, that whole, I got into TypeScript and now I can't go back. That's really the exact same experience that I had as well. That once I learned TypeScript and once I started using it, going back to JavaScript really becomes a bit of a struggle for me because you just get used to all of the niceties that TypeScript brings to the table. But before we get into like any of that, let's start talking about TypeScript and what TypeScript is. So I think the best way to set the stage here is to really talk about some of the common struggles that we have when we're using JavaScript, or more specifically, when it comes to data types or typing in JavaScript. Now, I want to be clear. My goal here is not in any way, shape, or form to bash JavaScript. That is not what I am doing here. If you like JavaScript, if you've got everything set up with, linting and Babel and whatever else it is, and you've decided this is the direction we're going, 100% keep doing that. So that is not my goal. My goal is not in any way, shape, or form to bash JavaScript. But that being said, I think we can all agree that there are a couple of things that come up quite frequently when we're working in JavaScript, and it all revolves around the fact that JavaScript is weakly typed. And so what that means is whenever I'm using a variable or I'm getting a return value back from a method or from a function, I really don't ever know what that is. And in fact, JavaScript doesn't necessarily know what that is either. And so the errors that I'm going to wind up getting when I do get errors are going to quite typically be at runtime. Because in order to figure out what a data type actually is, quite frequently, the code needs to be executed. And that's going to happen at runtime. So I'm now going to get sort of a clunkier development experience because I would like to know those errors at design time. I would like to know those errors at compile time. I want to know those errors without having to start running through a whole bunch of tests or go in and play around with my app to discover them that way. I want them as early as possible so that way I can go in and fix them. And on top of that, I want my editor to be able to best support me, that I don't memorize every single property name and field name and everything else that's associated with, all the objects that I'm working with. This is why I use like Visual Studio Code. This is why I use an editor to help give me all of that. And when we're using JavaScript, because again, our variables are weakly typed, we're also going to get reduced editor support. And in the end, that really just leads to a fair amount of struggle. It leads to, bugs that really could be fixed earlier rather than having them come up later, or potentially even when your application has been pushed out to production. Now, you might be looking at this slide and trying to figure out, well, what's the picture of this? And the reason for this is because when I was first building out a TypeScript presentation, I happen to be sitting in France, and so I did a real quick search for pain, and this is what came up. Not quite sure, but anyway, there you have it. By the way, those are as good as the jokes are going to get, so fair warning. So then what is TypeScript? Well, TypeScript is a language that was created by Anders Heiselberg, and it's designed to be a superset of JavaScript. And this is a very important point here, that TypeScript does not replace JavaScript. And that if you already know JavaScript, you're already well on your way to learning TypeScript. And if you happen to know, I would say actually kind of more Java than necessarily C#, although either one will work as well, is if you happen to know those languages, making the transition into TypeScript feels even more natural. That honestly, about the best way that I like to describe TypeScript is it's sort of a middle ground, I think, between the real strict typing and everything else that you get with a language like Java or C#, while yet still keeping some of that flexibility that a weakly typed language like JavaScript is going to bring to the table. Now, the last big point here is the fact that TypeScript will compile or transcompile, or as all the cool kids call it, transpile into JavaScript. You're still writing JavaScript. It's just that you're using a different language to do so. So again, kind of going back to that Java C# analogy, just like Java is going to compile down into bytecode and C# is going to compile down into intermediate language, your TypeScript will still compile down into JavaScript. So why use it? Well, we've hit some of this already, but the big one, of course, is going to be better type support. It's also going to help detect a lot of very common mistakes here. That one of the things that I frequently do, if you're anything like me, and I know I am, I'll sometimes get so focused on creating a method or creating a function on just that logic that I get to the end and I forget to return a value. TypeScript is going to be able to capture that and a whole host of other bugs that TypeScript really does help eliminate entire classes of runtime bugs. So it's going to make you a better developer. It will help you overcome some of JavaScript's quirks. And again, I think we can all agree that JavaScript does have a couple of quirks. And then the last big one is the ability to use modern features in older versions. That if you're having to run on an app that maybe is still using an earlier version of ECMAScript, sometimes you're not always able to use some of the features, maybe like async await, that you would like to be able to take advantage of. So fortunately, TypeScript, because of the fact that it's going to compile down into JavaScript, is going to eliminate that for you. That what will happen is you're going to be able to write the TypeScript, take advantage of all the features that you want, and then it will appropriately thunk down to the version of JavaScript that it's going to run. Okay, enough talking. Let's actually get in and see it. So I've got my copy of Visual Studio Code up and running here, and I'm going to use the command line. Let's just get rid of that. I'm going to use the command line to create a new Vue application. So I'm going to say Vue create, and let's just create that here. Chugga, chugga, chugga. Create it in the current directory, yes. And I'm going to manually select my features, and I'm going to just get rid of everything but TypeScript. And that's, of course, not in any way, shape, or form that you can't still take advantage of Babel or linting or anything else like that. You absolutely can. But for my demo, I want to sort of get rid of all the other moving parts and allow us just to focus in on the TypeScript piece. So I'm just getting rid of everything else there. And then for the version, I'm going to choose version 3, hit enter, and then just know the rest of the way down here and the defaults. Okay, cool. Chugga, chugga, chugga. It will then go ahead and do all the install and everything else. Sort of perfect timing because it gives me an opportunity to take a sip of water. And done. Okay, cool. All righty. So now, with all of that created, there is our project structure over there on the right-hand side. And by the way, one little tip in VS Code, this is called your workbench sidebar, this little space over here on my right. I personally really prefer to have that over there on the right side. So that way my code doesn't move as I add that back in and bring that out. So as you kind of move that around, your code stays in one place. It's a little thing, but I really like it. Okay, but we've got our project structure here. And I want to, for right now, kind of ignore everything. I'm going to talk about some of the special files that are created in a minute, and instead just focus in on a couple of very big TypeScript things. So let's start creating a little sample app here. And in my little sample app, I'm going to display out a list of dogs, because I'm a big dog fan, adopt, don't shop, all that good stuff. And I'm going to create a function here. Let's say export function get good dogs. And as we all know, they're all good dogs. And I'm going to return back an array here where I'm going to say name, and let's say Sammy, like that. And let's say age, and let's say 3. Cool. So there's my list of dogs. Right now, I just have one item in there. You could, of course, add multiple. Now, if I was to go in and start creating a Vue component, and I called get good dogs here, VS Code is going to be able to figure out the structure of our dogs, because after all, it's hard coded in there. But if I'm calling out to a service, that's now not going to be the case, because it's not going to be able to see that at design time, and it's not going to know what that data type is that's going to be coming back. So I'm going to get very limited support inside of VS Code. And on top of that, if I do have an error, especially if it's a typo, which again, something I think we all commonly do, I'm not necessarily going to know that until runtime. And that poses some problems. On top of that, there's nothing at all that's going to enforce any level of consistency. So, maybe I've got another dog in here, and instead of age, I add in breed. And we'll just say lab mix, like that. So now I don't have any consistency. There's nothing to enforce what this structure is supposed to look like. And this is where TypeScript comes to the rescue. And in particular, this is where interfaces come to the rescue. And I'm going to create a brand new interface, and I'm going to call this interface dog. And I'm going to add in 2 properties here. I'm going to say name, string, and then I'm going to say age and number, just like that. Now, I'm going to pause here for a moment, because if you're familiar with, say, like Java or C#, and you see the word interface, you might immediately be thinking, oh, wait a minute, does that mean that I now need to create a class? And while you can create classes and do inheritance and all of that good stuff in TypeScript, you don't have to do that. You don't have to create a class to use interfaces in TypeScript. Because after all, TypeScript built on top of JavaScript. JavaScript gives us that great little thing called duck typing. If it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. So when I create an interface here, what I'm really doing is I'm setting up a data structure, setting up a contract, I'm setting up a rule. And if I say, hey, this, whatever it is we happen to be working with, is a dog, then it's going to start enforcing those rules. So if I come down here and I say const dog, and I make that of type dog, and notice the syntax here, that I said colon and then the data type, this is now going to enforce rules. I'm not creating a class, just creating an object on the fly here, but I've said that it's a dog. And you'll notice, let me just zoom in real quick so you can hopefully see it a little bit better. Right there, I've got a couple of red squigglies. That is in fact what they're called, by the way. And in my red squigglies, what you're going to notice here, let's just say something like breed. Let's just add in breed real quick, breed, and we'll say lab mix, like that. There we go. And let's put a semicolon down there. And you'll notice that I'm still getting some issues here. Whoops, let's get an equal sign. There we go. Let's kind of double back. Hold on. Just realized I forgot my equals. That's where my red squiggly should have been. Under dog. There we go. So you'll notice that when I mouse over dog, ignoring the fact that it's declared but never used, that's not important right now. What you're going to notice is that type just empty object is missing the following properties of type dog: name and age. Now, TypeScript is going, hey, wait a minute. You told me this was going to be a dog. So if it's going to be a dog, it's got to have a name and it's got to have an age. So now I need to add those properties in order for this to work. And you'll also notice, let's also do this, that it's going to start to enforce my data types as well. So because of the fact that I said age is a number, it's going to require that age be a number. Otherwise, it's going to give me those red squigglies. So I'm already starting to catch some potential bugs. Now, how does that apply to our little get good dogs down here? Well, let me go ahead and get rid of that. So I'm not actually going to use it. What I can also do is I can indicate return types as well. So what I can do is I can say, hey, I'm going to return back an array of dogs. Now notice the syntax here. What I'm doing is I'm using what's known as a generic. And if you're not familiar with a generic, in a nutshell, this is basically like a variable, only for a data type. So array is already defined. And so I'm now just saying, hey, this is going to be a dog. So that's what I'm indicating here, is that this is going to be a dog. And you'll notice that I now get those red squigglies right down here. So now I need to add in an age in order for this to work. But you'll notice I still have that little extraneous breed here, doesn't know what that is. So I can add in breed, and then let's go ahead and put a question mark in front of that to make it optional. And now I can say breed string, and there is my TypeScript. Now the last little thing, and then I want to get in and create a little bit of Vue code here with this. But the last big thing that I want to highlight, I'm going to create a real quick script here, ts build and tsc, just adding in a script so I can just build the TypeScript. And I'll say npm run ts build. Boop. Sound effects help, by the way. What you're going to notice when I open up my store.js is that my interface does not exist here. That interfaces don't exist in JavaScript. And so as a result, when that JavaScript is created, the interface goes away. So they're completely weightless, and they will only help you, or I shouldn't say only help you, but they're designed to help you then at design time. So let's create a real quick component here, and I'm going to call this dogs.view. And I'll just use Visual Studio Code to extrapolate this out. And this is going to be define component. We'll just let that automatically get pulled in. And then let's say name and dogs. And whoops, don't forget my lang equals ts. Lang equals ts. There we go. So we'll say name equals dogs, and then we'll say data. And then now I can go ahead and start to define my data here. So I can say return, and let's say dogs. So it's going to be my list of dogs. And I'm going to set that equal to an array. But more specifically, I want this as an array of dogs. Cool. And let VS Code import that in for me. Cool. So now if I go up to my template here, and we'll just keep it simple. We'll just go ul v4, and we'll say dog index in dogs, and then we'll bind our key here. We'll be good developers. Index, boop, boop. There we go. And then let's go ahead and say li. And then now what you're going to notice is in here, I can say dog dot. You're going to complain about that? Dog dot. There we go. And now I'm getting that age, that breed, that name. And I'm getting that because of TypeScript. So this is just right there. And so now I'm going to get much better support. And I'm really going to get this like from start to finish here. So if I come down here and let's add on maybe a mounted function here, and we'll set up our dogs. We'll go ahead and load the get all good dogs. When I say this dot, what you'll notice is there's my dogs. And you'll notice that my dogs are going to, again, be that array of dogs that we've defined. And in fact, let's go ahead and try and set this to be some bad value. You'll notice, once again, red squigglies. Because it's going, hey, wait a minute, you told me this was supposed to be an array of dogs? That's not an array of dogs. And then last but not least, that if I use that get good dogs, there we go. This is now going to work just fine because get good dogs does return back my array of dogs. Okay, last little thing, because I know I'm just about at time here, that I want to highlight. A couple of other just like little files that you'll see inside of here. When you create this project, it is going to create a shim. This is just allowing TypeScript to load up all of your Vue files. That's just fine. You really don't need to do anything with that. And then the last one that I want to highlight down here is tsconfig.json. This controls how your TypeScript is going to get converted into JavaScript. One very big property in here that I always like to highlight is the implicit any. There we go, no implicit any. And by default, that's set to false, but you can also set that to true. And what that means is if I come back over here to my store, and let's say I create a real quick function here, function get dog, and I just add in an ID, that any data type in TypeScript means that we don't know what the data type is. And TypeScript will allow that by default. But I really do recommend, if at all possible, getting rid of implicit any, because this actually typically winds up just causing bugs, because now we're basically just back in JavaScript land where we don't know what a data type is. So I really do like that no implicit any. Okay. And so that is TypeScript inside of Vue. And if you do want to get further into Vue, you've seen the commercials, no doubt, but there is that cool little, why is that not showing up? There we go. That cool little code mission, which you can check out at aka.ms/code missions, and the possibility to win a Surface Duo. So definitely go in and check that out. And that is Vue and TypeScript. I'm Christopher Harrison, and any questions?
That was very cool, Christopher. Seriously. Do you actually have dogs, or are you just using dogs in your example?
No, we do. Yeah, we have an Amstaff mix, American Staffordshire mix named Sammy.
Okay, cool.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you real quick. How do you like your Surface Duo?
I actually don't have a Surface.
Oh, Jesus.
You could win one though, couldn't you?
Well, I work for Microsoft, right? I can't, but you could. No, honestly, everybody that I know that has one, everybody that I know that has one does love it. I don't, because we've got this little pandemic thing going on. I don't travel as much as I used to, and so as a result, I don't have that need that fits that Surface Duo. But if I was like back on the road again, I would absolutely love to have a Surface Duo.
Okay, I mean,
we'll edit. Should give him one.
Exactly. We'll just edit that out of the video. This whole section.
Perfect.
Exactly. Just slide the manila envelope under the door. But what we're going to do is...
Well, we were having a chat earlier about TypeScript. When this came up, I'd love your opinion. We were saying about, should we start teaching TypeScript in the boot camps?
This is such a fantastic question. And I go back and forth on this very much like on a daily basis because I create a lot of presentations, I create a lot of sample code, and I would really love to be able to kind of do more with TypeScript. So what I would say is, if you're doing a boot camp, if you're like a new developer, I would really recommend starting to learn TypeScript because it really is going to make your life easier.
Yeah.
And we're seeing Angular and Vue and so forth, like all of these frameworks being written in TypeScript, offering this great support for TypeScript. So definitely use it. When it comes to creating a brand new workshop today and you don't know whether or not your audience knows TypeScript, what I would say is look at what it is that you're going to be doing and see if maybe you could also teach them TypeScript as part of it, because a lot of times there's not a lot of big syntax updates that you need for TypeScript, so you might be able to just do them both at the same time. It's such a tricky question, and I don't know I have a perfect answer to that, but I would definitely say new developers, yes, start learning TypeScript.
That's a great answer. Well, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, we were just having a little debate about it. I'm like, man, when do you start? Do you just send people in right away and just, sort of do that leapfrogging of JS and right into TS? But whatever. I mean, they'll figure it out, I'm sure.
Yep.
Thank you very much for your presentation, sir. We are now also going to, I believe,
send you away.
Send you
if
off
more
to
people want to know about TypeScript and how to learn TypeScript and do TypeScript talking, Christopher's going to spend his time telling you all about it.